So just to introduce the presenters, we have Anna Ferguson from, the University of Auckland, a senior lecturer, Mark Hooper, but he's not able to be here today. Jess Williams, who is a maths teacher at Gisborne Girls High School. Rachel Cunliffe, who's the co-director of the Census School, New Zealand. And Pip Arnold, who supports maths and statistics teachers from years 1 to 13 through professional learning and development. So this is, I think, a very useful session. I'm sure everyone's going to find it's really useful as we prepare for the changes happening in the curriculum. I think it gives people information on how they prepare for the lessons, how they prepare for the curriculum, and how they prepare for the classroom and supporting students at their school. So thanks so much to the panel for offering their time and expertise. I'm sure it's going to be a very useful presentation. I'm sure you're all going to enjoy it. So over to Anna and the team for the data ethics discussion.
Kia ora, thank you, Mala. And I'll do a quick welcome on behalf of the panel, but then quickly hand over to Jess and Rachel and Pip. Let me just share my screen. Here we go. So yes, how we've structured our session is that each of the panelists is going to share a little bit of their insights, experiences, and kind of ideas and their perspectives on data ethics in 3 different contexts, and spend about 10 minutes each talking about their work so far in this space. And then I've got a couple of questions for the panelists, and then we'll hopefully have some time at the end for more questions as well and discussed in this space. So I'm going to hand over to Jess, who's going to talk a little bit about our Māori perspective on ethical considerations when data gathering. Over to you, Jess.
Cool, thanks Anna, thank you. Hi everyone, I'm Jess from Gisborne Girls High School. It's trying to be a nice day here in Gisborne, but I don't think it's going to stay that way. It's nice to be here and talk to you about what I do in the classroom in terms of ethics. And so thank you, thanks, read my mind. He wairua tō te data is a really strange thing to say and read for someone who's Māori. I'm sure our Māori people here who understand the language are going to be a little cringy at that, and I cringe every time I say it, but I can't say it in any better way. He wairua, it does, data, and so from an ao Māori perspective, data has mana, it has a wairua, it has stuff in it that we can't see, but we know is there, and we're kind of trying to implement that thinking into educating our secondary kids. And to be honest, I think our young kids can handle these ideas as well. So hopefully it kind of trickles into what they talk about when they're learning maths at primary level. And I did put this little statement about what Johnny said in terms of where the words come from, because I don't think it's something, well, it really was quite it changed the way I perceived the word data for sure, as something given rather than something collected, something analysed, which is probably what I would have self-described data before reading his statement. Thank you, Anna. And so I've stolen some stuff. I've just stolen stuff from bits of work that I do with juniors, and I think I've got a Year 13 experiment stuff and my new level 1 stuff I created this year, is I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to teach ethics to my kids. And so this from my junior experiments unit, which was probably where I started chucking it in. And I've been trying out using the understand, know, do model to kind of structure my topic my teaching units. And so in this one, I wanted them to understand that experiments help us see whether something causes another thing. And I wanted them to know the types of experiments, of course, and I was going to do those two types, the paired and independent. But I also wanted them to understand how we can collect really ethical, well, we can try to collect ethically considerate data to analyse. And so I wrote it as ngā tikanga rangahau kia tika me pono. That means our research rules so that our data is true, it's authentic, it's as accurate as we can make it. And so that's kind of the framework for how I teach the junior experiment unit. You know, when we keep coming back to what's our tikanga here, how are we going to collect that data? Are we going to hurt anyone while we're doing that? What can we do to make it better, to make it stronger? Because the purpose in general when we're collecting data, and I tell the kids the purpose is to collect as accurate a data as we can. And doing it in an ethical way helps us try to do that. Thank you, Anna. That's my Year 10 stuff. What's this? A snippet from level 3. Oh yeah, so about 3 years ago, I read Linda Tuhiwai's stuff on ethics, running ethical research, and this was in the context of postgraduate studies. So I took her stuff and I used it because it was really the first time I'd kind of been introduced to this idea, and I thought actually the kids I think can connect with this. And so I did in this year, I did make my level 3 experiment kids put a piece of their ethical considerations into their assessment scripts. And although they didn't need it for the standard, I did want them to consider ethics in this round of mahi that I hadn't done before in the previous year's learning. And Linda Tuhiwai Smith's 7 guidelines were what I used to help that, or help teach them what I wanted them to be considerate of when creating their experiments. I like her ones; they're really simple, and I think we can all connect to them. But it's really specific to dealing with human to human kind of things. And so experiments was a really nice place to put them. Thank you. The last one. I stole this from Leo. Oh, this was my year. So this I created this year. And this is from Walker Maths. And I really liked how simple it was. And so I kind of put it into one place and used it for my level 1 teaching for 1.1 now this year. And I liked that it was kind of quite broad. It took it a bit further away from just human to human interaction, and I can kind of generalize into dealing with other kinds of data, and maybe when I'm interpreting it as well, rather than creating a plan, which I think the 7 guidelines is a bit better at doing. But this I really loved. It was quite general and simple. Me mana ki te taonga, so look after the data that we're calling a taonga. Me pono ki te whakapapa, so stay true to where it came from. Remind yourself where it came from and how that impacts your interpretation, as well as what it is telling you. Me te aki te tau, and then look after it. Store it safely. Don't share it unless if it meets the purpose. Yeah, and if you are organising something, it's important that you share with your participants what your purpose is, and that they can then choose to either be a part of it or not. Cool. Thank you. And so after that, we do a bit of mahi. Some of these kids have done psychology before, so these aren't unfamiliar. But they do a little kind of looking up at what unethical looks like, I suppose. And that's a really cool way to get them involved in talking about what makes them feel uncomfortable when they're reading about these experiments. Thanks, Anna. And their variability is a really nice link into ethical data collecting and interpreting. And the data questions from Pip really create a framework for what they need to consider when thinking about their data. And in that lies the whakapapa, lies the manaakitanga, those kaitiakitanga, those kind of concepts, those ao Māori concepts all lie within those 6 questions. And then I give some examples. Thanks, Anna. You're kind of reading my mind. Okay, how were they measured? The puppy moved while being weighed, and we talk about that. Was the data collected ethically? And we talk about why it might be a little unethical to not ask whānau's permission about asking year 10s about vaping and smoking. Who was measured? Was the sample collected without bias? Are there 2 more there, Anna? Let's see. Oh, yeah. Who was measured? Reminding yourself of the purpose. People who are non-Māori were asked about being Māori, or people who were Japanese were asked about being non-Japanese. I mean, just reminding yourself of the purpose of your investigation. And are you collecting data from the group or the units or the people that are going to help you investigate their purpose? And the sample was randomly chosen. So we talk about bias and our preferences, which can be handy if it makes it easy to collect data, but we just need to acknowledge that and the impact those decisions have on our data in the end. Yeah, thank you. And so to end, this was something I did, I think. I did a tikanga presentation at the last conference up north, and this was in there. So I took this as a reminder that tikanga, that is the rules, the way we interact, the right way of doing things in stats looks like making ethical decisions because we want good data, we want accurate data, and of course the reason why we research is to find something out. And if we find something out, then we know something more. And if we know something more, then we can do better and be better. And so if everyone kind of benefits from that process, then that's ultimately a cool thing. So our investigations need to have a purpose that we always remind ourselves of. It needs to protect whatever we're investigating, whoever we're investigating. And ultimately, we need to prosper from those investigations. Yeah. Cool. That's me.
Oh, ngā mihi. Jess, thank you so much. Okay, we're on our strict time. We'll come back. We'll have time to talk to Jess at the end. So we're going to hear for about 10 minutes from Rachel, who's going to tell us all about how Census at School deals with all of these ethical issues. Over to you, Rachel.
Thanks, Anna. And thanks, Jess. That was really good. I think a few of my slides are going to really build on what you were talking about. So kia ora tātou. Yeah, I'm Rachel Cunliffe, the co-director of Census at School. So hopefully many of you are getting emails from me all the time. This is my face behind the name. We've been running the project now for 22 years, collecting data from students. Last time we had 52,000 students taking part. And when I was asked to speak on this panel, I just really reflected about how data ethics is embedded into every single part of the project. I'm going to really briefly take you through different parts. We can go to the next slide. Thanks, Anna. When we sort of first come to ethics, I think a great place to start is with the question, why? Why are we doing things? So for Census at School, we want to bring statistics to life in New Zealand classrooms. with real relevant data that's about our students. It's reflecting their lives. So for us, we want to view everything through this lens, and that we need to ensure ethically that's exactly what we're doing. So we've got clear wording on our website, but also in practice, we really enforce that data is only being used for educational purposes, not commercial or research driven. Lots of companies have approached us over the years wanting to find out things about kids, and we turn them down because it's not for commercial gain. But I think in recent years, we've become way more explicit about our why, because I think more people are asking, why are we doing things? And so that's why we created a behind the questions guide for teachers and students to hopefully spark really rich classroom discussions. We're not afraid of asking why, why are we doing this? Why are we asking this question? How are we asking it? And that's the kinds of things we cover in that guide, as well as what kind of investigations can be done once we've got that data in. I think people are so really reluctant more and more to give over data without a good reason to. So it's an ongoing thing for us to keep working to ensure that the purpose of the project is really clearly communicated on our website for people who are interested in the project, to teachers through our emails and our communications, and also for teachers then to pass on to their students. So it's a partnership between us and also the teachers. Now you'll see pictures of students, these people taking part in Census at school in almost all my slides. And I think the reason for that is I just want to keep in the forefront that it's a real privilege to have teachers and students involved in this project, and to look after their data and to honor that, that privilege that we have. Thanks, Anna. So when it comes to choosing what questions we want to ask, we also need to ask with care. And so we have a lot of criteria to determine whether a question is a good fit, and we include that now in our Behind the Questions resource. Student voice is number one, super important. So we get students to submit questions for future surveys. It has to be really interesting for students, and often teachers say, hey, can you ask this question? Really, it's not about what adults are interested in here. It's about what students want to know about lifestyle, their interest, well-being, opinions. Yes, we want to make sure it, is suitable for lots of different data analysis, and that we've got some time series. So we keep some questions from past surveys, and we do keep some that are aligned with the official census to help raise awareness about the importance of collecting data nationally. We also have to kind of think about age appropriateness, because we have students who are right from sort of around year 3 all the way up. Sometimes they're in mixed classes. So we have some very young students. Has to be super respectful, easy to understand and answer. Now, when I say answer, a simple question like, how many pets do you have at home, is not necessarily easy for people to answer without kind of clarifying what do we mean by a pet, or what does home mean, because very different structures of family, kids are different households and things. So trying to make sure it's really easy to answer. The whole project's about getting kids excited and interested in stats. So we generally want it to be positive and encouraging. So we avoid questions about something illegal or unsafe behavior. We're also really cautious about asking anything that could embarrass or exclude students. So it really needs to be inclusive, culturally aware. So when we were asking about musical instruments this time, we were thinking about Māori names for instruments and particular instruments that we should include in there. Things like that. We have a really great process in our team. So we, really robust discussions. We don't hold on to these questions too tightly. When we first start analyzing sort of which questions we should include and what should we include, there's a lot of, but what about this? What about that? And kind of a lot of critique of it. What's your eye color? But what about people with 2 different eyes? How do we deal with that? We also have Māori advisors. We have the people from Stats New Zealand's questionnaire team. And of course, we get your feedback and students to test. We always ask for that as part of our process. Okay, next slide, thanks. Consent, sounds like a checkbox often. We fill in a form online and then we sort of quickly check this box about consenting to info being collected and used in a particular way, or consent to take part in something. But ethics about consent is way more than just ticking a box. So some of this is the way we take care of things at Census at school, but a lot of it is left to the teachers and their schools. So you think about students arriving to your class and you tell them, today we're going to be doing census at school. We would hope and encourage that you've already gone through a really strong communication process first, involving the principal, the wider school whānau, and the students themselves. We're really clear in our communications that participation is voluntary, but something to think about is, is there genuine student autonomy when you're in a class setting? Is there genuine choice? Do students feel they can say no if they don't want to take part? So from our point of view, we say it's opt-in, and it is for teachers. But for students, this may mean that they're actually choosing to opt out. So that's something to think about, how to handle that. And really, it comes down to, are they being informed about the project in a way that they understand and they know what the data is going to be used for, and also how it won't, so they feel comfortable taking part. Data is valuable, and like anything valuable, it needs to be protected. So this means we need to really protect trust in the project. So this starts when we collect data, and we've made this really essential to the survey. So you'll see this sort of information at the top of the survey when they take part. Yes, it looks kind of wordy, and many people may just totally skip over reading it. But for those who are hesitant or have got questions and want to be fully informed, this is really vital info. We're not collecting names or personal identifiers, so we can ensure that they're anonymous. You'll see the purpose listed there again, to make it really clear. And there's lots of notes about who's getting the data and how it can be used. We send some back in a classroom data set, and some of that data is split into different spreadsheets. And that's to stop matching of data to students. So as a teacher or other students in the class can't put all these sort of pieces together and go, oh, I know who that is. And then there's issues for those students. Some data only goes into the national database, for example, gender information. So if you want to do things with gender, you need to use the national database rather than the classroom data. And that's quite a sensitive one. We explicitly tell students you can skip that gender question if you don't want to share it. And yeah, that's also for privacy and identifiability. Next one, thanks. Yeah, great. We also need to really carefully protect access. So if you've ever used our random sampler or database tools on our website, you'll see that there's conditions of use. It's for educational purposes. We've got random samples and lots of security behind the scenes for that. Okay, the next one, thank you. Protecting data is also about using it, and we're exploring data to tell stories. And I think it's really important to use the data in ethical ways. And so being really careful about avoiding harm through interpretation, thinking about confirmation bias, stereotyping, risks of interpretation. So we have a lot of info about this in our Behind the Questions guide. We're also really encouraging sensitivity when using gender identity information. And I think there's lots of room for empathy when you're talking about these questions too. We've asked, for example, how many close friends you have or how you feel overall today. The data is coming from real people with real feelings. So the way you talk about it needs to be really empathetic too. And the last sort of thing before I finish up is, equity issues. Over the time, digital access and school resources have become less of an issue, but they're still an issue. And so that's something for teachers to consider, how to handle unequal access or participation. We work hard in our outreach to Te Kura Kaupapa Māori schools. The census is bilingual. We also work really hard on usability and accessibility within the survey. So you'll see it's a really simple design. That's to make sure it's following all those guidelines, helping people with disability. We've also got the ability to read the questions aloud with an audio feature to help some students as well. So basically, when I think about census at school, it's embedded everywhere, not just what we ask, how we ask it, how we use it, and how we share it. It's not just one decision, it's like a series of really big and small decisions. It's not a checkbox. And I think it's an ongoing conversation that everyone can be part of. From everyone has thoughts about their need to protect their privacy and also the benefits of open data. It's this sort of ongoing tension. And people are rightly concerned about how their data is being used. So for us, the first thing is communication, listening to people, adapting, and always putting our students first because they're trusting us with their stories when they share their data with us. And every story, I think, deserves to be handled with care. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel. That was fantastic. And now, and again, just for time, we're on to Pip. So we said 2 minutes each, we've got a little bit over, but I think we're hearing some great stuff, so I think it's great. So Pip, over to you.
Kia ora, thanks, Anna. And if you can move to the first slide, that'd be great. So when I started writing the book in sort of probably 2020, at the start of COVID, one of the things I worked really closely with was with Tony Trinick about what happened in the Te Mātauranga or Aotearoa curriculum in statistics versus what happened in the English version. And it was fascinating. The really only obvious difference was we didn't have ethics up front and centre in our curriculum statement at the time. We do now, but we didn't at that point. And so it was something that was, deliberately looked at. And you'll see, if you can see the new data detective poster there, you'll see that ethics is one of the things that is mentioned quite clearly in the plan. But actually, ethics isn't just in the plan. It's where we've chosen to sort of highlight it. But as it says here, that's something that we need to be starting right from the beginning. And, it's already been mentioned by Rachel and by Jess. But, the thing that probably for me mostly goes, if it feels uncomfortable, it is, flag it. You don't have to try and make a bad thing work. Just find another topic that should work. And that's pretty much the nutshell for me. But we'll move on. So in the process of writing the book, I did a lot of reading around, and, there's lots of ways you can approach ethical practices, but I looked at the stuff that was happening for the Crest Awards. I had a look at some research, and I actually had a look at some of the Te Ao Māori stuff, and so trying to bring that all together. And so these are the 6 ethical practices that I brought together. And if you think about what Jess said across her example she had, you'll see that these things all come together. And so it may be a useful place for people to start when they're looking at what they're doing with their students. Let's just move on. I don't want to hang on that too long. So there is some existing material about ethics on Census at School. So there is the Crest Awards, the full document that used to be on Crest was actually taken down. We approached them and they gave us permission to put it back up on Census at School. And then this ethics in statistics document is one that was developed to support primarily experiments, but not just experiments in the senior secondary area. So if people have forgotten about those, they're really worthwhile going and having a look at. There are also a couple of activities that have got ethics specifically built into the activity. One of them is how much bullying, and I'm going to look at that in a bit more detail in a moment. And the other one is it takes a village. And this is a really interesting activity where students go and interview superannuitants in their local area, and there's quite a lot of stuff around ethics in that as well, so it's worthwhile having a look at. But I want to look a little bit more at the how much bullying. This activity here used to be set up, so this was the survey that kids got, and when I looked at rewriting it, I was quite stressed looking at the survey form, and I go, well, I've got to change it. And then I thought, actually, no, I'm not going to change it. I'm going to use it as a tool to have that conversation around ethics. And so in the how much bullying activity, they do actually have a look at it, and like this would be handed out and you answer it in a group, your friends are all there looking at what you write. And so those are the things we really want students to think about. This isn't necessarily about looking at something we've done and considering the ethics of what we've done. It's looking at what somebody else has put together and saying, why do I feel uncomfortable? What are the things that we need to think about? So let's move on and think about, so what are the things that come out of this activity? So the big things for me are the minimizing the risk of harm. and respecting and protecting participants' privacy and confidentiality. So let's look at that. So the survey, there's a couple I've pulled out. So example, there's a question that says, which ethnic group do you identify most? Well, what if I identify equally with two? So, it's not considering people and where they come from. It's also making judgments and assumptions beforehand. And then the second one I've picked up there is this open response. If you did nothing, please explain why. And there's that real sense of, being told off. And then, I might not answer this honestly. I might actually decide to do something else because I feel really uncomfortable. And that is a big issue with surveys generally, that people don't answer honestly. And then if we go to the next one, what we're looking for in this activity is that really kids will feel uncomfortable, and that's what we want to happen. But we want them to recognize that so that when they start creating surveys, they can think about that from an ethical perspective as well. So we'll move on. So in another example, where here I'm looking at you just starting to think about the investigation, and we have, sorry, go back one. We have questions where we interrogate the investigative question, but one of the questions that we need to be asking kids right at the start is this an area that people would be happy to share information? And if that's not a happy area, or people don't want to share, then we shouldn't be doing it. That's really ethics in a nutshell. And so anyway, next one. This is an activity that I did with Letitia and Sherry, and I've also shared it in other situations. I think we did some stuff at the Stats Day, Jess and Michelle and the link will be there to those slides. But the idea of this activity started with, oh, look, we've got our smartphones, the kids have them. Not all of them have them, but they have them. Let's think about something we want to know about our group. And again, we set this activity up with the intention of starting to bring out those things about data ethics. All right, so we wanted kids to think about a topical theme. All right, the next slide. And so once we'd done that topical theme, what we then wanted them to do was share that photo, and they were going to have to share that photo with the whole group. So this is the setup. I'm not saying we did it, but this was the setup. And so what we asked both the students and the teachers to think about was, what misgivings might they already have about this activity? All right. And so, the first thing, and so there's some ideas which we'll come to in a minute, but we wanted them to think about the concerns or misgivings that they had, and then to think about where they might fit under those ethical practices. Okay, so we'll go on to the next one. So then, back one, jumping too fast. So then the idea was that if we've got this issue, how might we mitigate it? All right, so if the issue is, I don't want to share photos of me, it's like, well, okay, maybe we need to think about topics or photos that we share that don't have people in them, for example. All right, so that was the activity that we did with teachers, but you could do this with students. So the next slide gives some examples of what came up. So you can see the blue was some of the issues that people felt might be or a problem where we need to think about the ethical practice, and then the pink was where some suggestions about how we might mitigate it. So the two on the left were from a session that we did with student teachers in Georgia and the US, and the ones on the right, I'm just trying to get my left and right, were just some of the feedback from the session we did with teachers in New Zealand, which I am going to finish writing up, just FYI. So we'll go on to the next one. And then this here is just a little bit of information from a paper that Letitia and Sherry and I wrote. And you can see that we've taken each of the ethical practices. We've found an example of where that might have come up in that lesson. And then we've put some examples of how we might make a consideration, an ethical consideration. All right. So that's just another example. And then I just want to leave you with this data ethics canvas. And the intent is not that you can read it, but there are other resources around that you can have a look at. And then the next two slides just pulled a couple of them up. And so these are some of the questions. These are deeper level questions than what we've looked at that you may want to go into with your seniors, and you may want to pick. There's one more example of those. All right. So in that data ethics canvas, there's quite a lot of things you can think about, way more than we need for schooling, but teachers may want to go and have a look at it as an option. That's me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Pip. And for everyone who's wondering at this point, yes, these slides will be shared. So all the links and all the examples and amazing mahi that everyone has shared will be available for everybody. So I had not much to do with this panel, as you can tell, apart from trying to mind read when to do the next slide for the presenters. I did put together a couple of questions for the panel. And in fact, the first one that I kind of put, I put this forward to the panelists as well, so they knew in advance. I actually feel across the three talks has been pretty well covered. This was my question sort of around, yeah, thinking about ethical data practices across the whole sort of cycle of using data, and also how we can create some safe spaces. Because some of these aspects can be uncomfortable and can be quite kind of when you self-review yourself, reflect on these practices, can make you feel a little bit uncomfortable about your kind of past behaviors or use of data. But I feel actually that across those talks that's been pretty well done. So I'm going to skip to the second question, which was, you know, in terms of us thinking about introducing data ethics, my sort of position is that we've been teaching data ethics the whole time, just quite implicitly or unconsciously. So every time that we as teachers are engaging with data ourselves in the classroom, we're modeling our own kind of practices around ethics and the actions that we take. And so my question for the panelists is, what practical steps can teachers take to more explicitly model their own ethical data use for students? So over to Pip, Rachel, or Jess.
I'll start then. Thanks, Anna. I think when it comes to census at school, teachers can make space for questions before you get started instead of rushing into taking part. There's time, and I think just modeling that by teachers who can talk through concerns first before taking part in something where their data is being collected is really important.
Thank you, Rachel.
Oh, yeah, I was thinking about this question, Anna, and how even just this week, how data ethics has been kind of a little pinging light that's gone off, like a little warning light that I probably could have been more considerate. And one example was I had some kayako from another school come and visit, and I didn't tell my kids they were coming in, and they beat me to the classroom. So these two male teachers were in our girls' classroom, and our year 11s, and they were all kind of, there was a bit of chaos happening in the room, but I kind of thought, shucks, how could I have done that better? Because these kayako have come to observe our level 1 class, but I didn't tell the girls they were coming in. And now they're here, and everything's kind of in an uproar. And so kind of, I suppose there's so many opportunities every day to be considerate ethically to our students, especially. But observations are one of them. Do you tell your kids when observers are coming in, and do you make sure everyone understands the purpose of why they're there? Our observers ask the kids questions. So do they have permission, really? Are the kids okay with them being asked by this strange new adult in the classroom some questions about their learning? Are they okay with that? And up until recently, we've just done it to them. And I suppose what I'm saying is if something's getting done to our learners, chances are there's space there for us to be a little bit more considerate.
Wow. Thank you, Jess. And Pip, anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I guess those ideas about that I shared, where we're deliberately setting up to actually challenge the data ethic process. So we're being really overt. So we're not going in to do like, I want to do this project and then we're going to consider data ethics as part of the project, but actually I've picked something where I really want to emphasize and highlight the data ethics of that activity, like data ethics almost is the focus for doing that activity. So we're making them much more aware And I think, Jess, it comes, and Rachel, comes back to that sort of how we behave in that situation too. So like, for example, one of the activities we did with the photos was looking at what's your favorite food. And one of the potential things there is, of course, different, and we're a multicultural nation, but different kids have different foods that are their favorites. And we might look at it and go, oh my God, what's that? But, Letitia said something that always sits in me is don't yuck somebody else's yuck. And I think it's not just when we're looking at data from our own group, but if we're looking at some data from somewhere else, like for example, the current census, we have things about gaming behavior, and there's some, kids have to put a response. Well, our students are going to be dealing with that. And before they deal with that, we probably need to talk to them about how they respectfully work with that data and don't actually comment on what other people say, and it's just being aware in advance of where those potential things can happen. And it's not just in the data collection. This is now as we're starting to analyze data. So, I always talk about, as teachers, we need to model out loud what's going on in our head. And so I just reiterate that, if you're doing something that is around data ethics, you're making all these decisions in your head. How about articulating as appropriate what's going on so your students understand that you've actually gone through and considered all these ethical implications as part of getting to that point? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important. I think if students can see us talking about how we're making decisions around ethics and our own decisions around data, then it's something that's lived. It's not just something we're teaching them to do as a knowledge, but actually a practice. Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you all so much. So we've got a little bit of time for anybody, for all of you wonderful folks who've been listening and must have a bunch of questions, or have maybe even a couple of questions that we can squeeze in before we finish. If you want to put them in the chat box, or if you want to turn your microphone on and ask it directly, go ahead. Thank you.